Hi, I'm Hannah, and I'm going to talk about sunshine, nature, and the ecology of small art. That might sound like a whole ramble, but I promise it's going to make sense. And the whole point of this is just to kind of freeform, explain, vibe. So if you want to kind of create art alongside, I've got this like little video of me creating in the background.
We're not in a rush. We're going to master and learn this step. You powerful, you beautiful, you have all that you need to succeed. You understand that, right?
I want to keep a lot of these topics relatively light because I know they have a tendency to get super heavy when you're talking about global warming, ecology, race, and empire. But the point of that is art. Art is the bit that adds the beautiful layer to it, that helps the processing, and that's what I'm going to do, hopefully. So nature's been the focus of a lot of my most recent projects. Mainly in the dark months, it was more of a sign of hope that all of this colour and brightness and sunshine was coming. But it also encompasses that aesthetic of the poison flower, boho, brat, kind of this decay, which a lot of people see as a representation of recession pop, Y2K revival, things like that. But the way this links into small art is what kind of materials I'm using for my projects and development, and what do I do with all of my projects. And also, I'm making all of this from a table inside of a flat, suspended a couple of floors in the air, and I couldn't tell you the last time I created art outside. I tend to walk at least like 45 minutes every day, alongside a key part of nature, the river, which features a lot in my work. I've always lived near water, and it's such like a key grounding and centralizing thing for me. Always has been, and hopefully throughout my life, I want to keep that up. I like the way that that fits into my life. But it also has got me thinking about what traditions my art fits into. As someone of dual heritage or mixed race, depending on what wording you want to use, it's also made me think about my influences and my politics, especially in such a volatile context at the moment. I mean, when is the context not volatile? But it also made me think about where I am physically, geographically, ethnographically. I don't know whether that's a word, contextually, but where my inspirations come from, and this level of responsibility that comes with someone as having seen both sides or breaching two sides or being the link between two sides. This kind of Afropean influence, which is described really well in one of the books that I included in the start. I really enjoyed the fact that the writer's a northerner as well. It's from Sheffield. A lot of these books feel kind of London central. It's all very heavy on the Brixton, but which isn't a bad thing necessarily, but it was refreshing to have that perspective and have this first, second, third generation experience centralized in the UK, or starting in the UK and then spreading out to Europe, because a lot of the media I consume around topics such as ecology, art, spirituality and their intersections is American. So it was nice to have that. And it's also got me thinking about tracing back my influences and a name for this succession, or a name for this I don't know whether heritage is the right word, but I hope that point is coming across. It is going to become clearer the more I explain it, which is, the whole bloody idea. But so one of the first things I think is cited directly from Afropean, and it's where he's talking about a graffiti artist in the town where he grew up, which is Sheffield. And I'd sent this to a friend who's also from Sheffield, because when I read it, I was just so, like, I'd never heard someone connect Jean-Michel Basquiat to the north of England, But it's a really interesting comparison. He's talking about a northern graffiti artist called Fisker, and the way even JMB will shorten to I hate that, no, I'm never doing that again. He started tagging in the New York undergrounds with the tag Samo, and whereas Basquiat now is selling for multiple millions. I mean, Bowie's own paintings, We Don't Even Want to Start, on the Carter Knowles, is like, there's this high price and high value attached to his work. And Fisker got locked up, and when I think it was Grindbusters in early or kind of mid 2000s UK, especially in the north, I remember seeing these people, like the anti-graffiti people, who as soon as a piece of art was put up, which we'll get onto the is graffiti art thing later, because the answer is yes, but there's this whole complicated discussion of value. It's when does it become valuable to someone? Who decides? Who wipes it away? If it's in a public space, is that piece of art in the public possession? Do you want to get democratic about it? Do you want to take a vote about whether it's cleaned off or not? But these two artists that both started off tagging, and one is now worth, hundreds of millions probably. I don't know how many works. And one that got locked up for I think 7 years for doing the same thing. It's an interesting comparison. And it shows, we're all connected from New York to Sheffield. And it also got me thinking about who owns the land, who owns the resources that I'm using. A lot of kind of natural items are used in my work, stuff like dried flowers and leaves and pieces of wood, things that I found on little hikes, little walks, whatever. And as much as this is considered public possession, I always feel a little bit guilty when I use them. It's not for its intended purpose and I'm kind of doing something wrong. But that kind of innovation is really exciting to me. That I really enjoy doing that in the work. But when we look at who owns the land in a wider sense, it got me thinking about a play that I studied in theatre. I think it was third or fourth year, and it's called Black Men Walking, and it's a group of black men who hike through, I think it's the Peak District, this idea that there were laws in England that would have prohibited them walking through the land about 50 to 100 years prior to this. But they're also discussing male mental health and how the stigmas are attached to their community, and by getting out in the land, it's almost a safe container. The being in the hills, or the hills themselves, are a safe container for their discussion. The earth hears it. The earth says, I've got you. Let me absorb some of that and let you go home a little bit lighter. And who is allowed to have that privilege? Who is allowed to be heard by the earth? Who is allowed to get out there? And who is allowed to do things? And this privilege then has the tones of empire and race and class and gender, sexuality, ability, and it's never not complicated. Which is interesting because it's such a natural source. We've made this complicated. The earth just exists. All of this nature just happens year round. There's quotes, if you scroll through Pinterest far back enough, it's like does the moon ask permission to shine? Does the sun ask permission to... No, it just kind of, obviously. But as humans, we have to ask permission to exist, to have access to the land that we've either been born or dragged onto. A lot of people, there's always a joke about when people say go back to your own country. It's like, yeah, if you're going to buy me the ticket, yeah, sure, I'd love to go back to the Caribbean. Go on, pay up. It's very frustrating to then see this trickle through to art. And it's great that it's being discussed, especially in the kind of theatre references and in the topic of ecology. And by my studies, I got to explore things like this and then felt the confidence to just independently research it, buy the books, annotate it, write down my notes, formulate some thoughts in this video. But that comes with the privilege of having access that university first. Like, these kind of books, there's no way in hell I would have been reading these a couple of years ago. I would have gone, that's too dull. I'm not reading that the whole way through. Yeah, I know it's important, but it's heavy and it's complicated language, and that's not for me. So there is still a privilege to that access of information, and the way I'm formalizing, the way I'm kind of free flow thinking these thoughts. I don't know. I sound like MC Hammersmith. That's hilarious. But the way that privilege intersects with art has literally never been clearer. I think having or competing with people whose main clients and main customers are their family and family friends, and a lot of people, I maybe won't touch on that because please let me enter the room, let me in the rooms with you, please. But seeing that touch on art was a little bit disheartening, so I returned to books like this to rediscover an ownership of creative expression, of creative inspiration, of seeing nature and going, wow, that's really cool, I'm going to make something that processes my feelings about that and reminds me to be grateful for all of the things that I have had access to and all of the things that I've experienced. So there was a few things that I'd found in the book published by the Tate which were really helpful. Obviously this book is about ecology in itself, but it's a localised organisation, so it's very focused on England. One of the pieces mentions a historic event, which then relates back to the play Black Men Walking, and it reminded me of kind of points that were brought up when I was studying it. And this historical event is the Kinder Scout mass trespass in 1932, and it was this protest against the laws about land ownership restricting who could have access to the countryside, and the benefits of getting outside in the fresh air and experiencing nature for your mood, for your physical health, for your emotional, spiritual health to a certain degree. And then linking back to that, who gets the privilege to be heard and supported by nature and the earth. So the Black Men Walking then reminds an audience that people have always been present in these spaces and will always access these spaces regardless of whether you say you own them or not. If it's something like a mountain or like a field, it's this, who gets to put their name on it, who gets to decide who gets let in the gate. And within the play, this community that is then built from people who don't perceive themselves to belong in that area. They travel from a city or where they live to the Peak District to then go walking. And that's when they're discussing their mental health. And that then, I'm kind of starting to repeat my previous point, but people have always been present in these spaces where they've not been allowed to anyway. This kind of defiance really embodies an element of nature that I really appreciate. This resilience that every year after a harsh winter, the spring comes back. And I think I'd written a poem about this in first year of uni when I saw the spring in Glasgow for the first time. And every winter I forget that spring is going to come. And in my own practice, a lot of the best things always come just as I'm about to give up. And that, knowing that will come just as the cycle of the year, wheel of the year, will keep rotating as long as it can, that is what I've got to do with my art as well. I've just got to keep creating as long as I have the ideas, as long as I have the inspiration, and not worry about who is going to perceive it and whether, someone else has got an easier go at it and an easier pre-built client base. Okay, great. Not really relevant to whether or not I create the piece or not. I can create it and keep it, like this trinket tray is going to be used in my bedroom. So I can keep it for me. I've always made little pieces of art that I can use around the flat. And that's one of the main drivers for my art in particular, this kind of utility and repurposing almost. And I also use like found things or old perfume bottles that I thought were really pretty and old wine bottles that I thought were really pretty. Also, like everybody who's ever studied at university, where bottles become like a decoration at one point. Red flag, girly, red flag. But just like this piece of, air quotes, rubbish can be then seen as art, or this piece of flower that's fallen off a tree can be used for art, it can also be rubbish. Two things can be true at once. It's this kind of dialectics. It's this mutually inclusive. There is a phrase for it when two things can be true at once. It's steering away from binary thinking, which most Indigenous cultures only introduce binary thinking with expansion of empire and colonization. But there's these two ideas that I breach together, like the kind of metaphor for having dual heritage or kind of mixed race. There's an idea that everyone should have access to the land, and this understanding that British land is beautiful and that I'm really privileged, and that a lot of people from where I grew up, a lot of people who are of a similar background or race to me haven't had access to that space, have either felt unwanted or been told literally or legally that they are not wanted there. And two things can be true at once. I am British and European, and it's a beautiful... I love travelling through Europe, the culture and different kind of relaxed speeds are great. I absolutely love it. But even when I was in Amsterdam, all of these examples of colonisation are very evident, and of empire. And even in Scotland, you think because it's often considered separate from England that, yeah, you can get away with it, whatever. But it's just not the case. It's just not the case. And the book by T.M. Devine is very evident of that. I think anybody who lives in Scotland is aware of most of the kind of negativity and most of the themes of colonisation, do stem back from English/British/Royal/ 1700s kind of era influence. But nobody is completely guilt-free of it. I think even my family name stems back to a Gallic slave owner, so it's very complicated. And even the people who have previously been colonised and moved out of their land then start doing it themselves. And two things can be true at once. I can be European and I can love Europe, and I can be really ashamed of the history and ashamed of the exclusivity and the fact that my privilege does come with a little bit of shame. And even though things are complicated and I'm stressed and I'm working and I feel that I've had to work a lot harder than a lot of people in industries I'm in, and I get, even in terms of chronic illness, I always feel burnt out and I'm always tired, I'm always in some sort of pain, there is always some sort of discomfort. Such is life. I think, I don't know a person, actually no, that's a lie, I do know people like that who don't experience that, but that doesn't mean that I shouldn't have access to those industries and this kind of life. And I kind of have to make peace with that. Like nature, the resolution is just to exist and keep doing it year in, year out. And there's not really any other option, unless you kind of look at existentialism and you go the other side of Hamlet, where instead of taking arms against a sea of troubles and by opposing them, you just give in. And I'm at a point in my life where that's just not an option for me. That's not where I am anymore. That option has well and truly closed. I fight for the life that I want with every inch of my being, every breathing moment. And that is at the same time as the knowledge that a lot of my ancestors haven't had the opportunity to do this. I own property at a young age as a single woman, and maybe going back 100 years, that wouldn't have even been legally possible. So it's uncomfortable, and it's strange to come from a minority and now have a moment of privilege, and then have it be reflected in my little peaceful thinking time in art. Crazy. No, not happy. But we can do uncomfortable things. We have to sit with uncomfortable things. And reflecting on nature has always grounded me back to this sense of community and interconnectedness, and there is not one without the other. There's no success of mine without success of my community. And it's linking back to a top secret site-specific project that I want to keep under wraps, but I'm really excited about it. And I wish with every inch of positive energy in my being that this goes well, because, oh my God, it could be so beautiful. I don't want to spoil it, and I don't want to jinx it, but the exploration of nature and site and location and heritage has been beautiful, and I've really enjoyed it. I think seeing the sun come back up and having this hope and reconnection to nature instead of, oh my God, it's freezing, put the heating on. It's so nice, and I'm so grateful, and I'm so lucky to have seen another spring and seen another summer, because I know a lot of people won't get the chance to. So, yeah, a bit of a kind of heavy end to that section of the rant. And I did say it was going to try and keep it a little bit more sunshiny and light. But in times like this, that then is ignorance. And that's not what I'm doing either. So, what can you do? So I want to end by saying thank you for watching, and thank you for listening. Thank you for thinking with me. Hopefully multiple people thinking together makes change. So I hope you've been body doubling and created something whilst I've been chatting absolute brown. But yeah, maybe it's time I get an intro and an outro. I think I'm doing this starting to be consistent enough to think about it that way, because I can never think of something funny to say at the end, especially when I've ended it on a kind of low note. So I'll try and find a funny clip to put at the end. But thank you. Drop some interactions if you enjoyed the video, and I'll speak to you soon.